there is no lawful basis for including the greenbelt to incorporate the woodlands. As a result of this advice, officers have developed proposals to take some of the woodlands into allocation HSG4. To give this effect, it would be necessary to rescind minutes 307 and 527. Question: has this council explored every avenue in returning Bedworth woodlands to the greenbelt, using in particular the test for boundary extension to existing greenbelt, as HSG4 and the greenbelt are adjacent to each other and in planning terms quite a normal process? In this particular process, it does not perform poorly. In fact, it performs highly, 4 out of 5 to be precise. So before you delete minutes 307 and 527, was the boundary extension to existing greenbelt sought in the legal advice, yes or no? I am asking this tonight and appealing that you do not rescind minutes 307 and 527, mainly because I think you should stick to your word and return the woodlands to greenbelt where it belongs. If tonight you do decide to rescind the minutes, the action group will be calling for councillors Danny Aldington and Tony Lloyd to resign from this council for misleading the electorate of Slough Ward due to the notorious leaflet which read, "Labour has a proven history in protecting the woodlands. It remains council policy to protect it, and as your Labour councillors, we have no intention of changing our policy as long as we are in power." So come on, councillors Aldington and Tony Lloyd, stick to your promise and save the woodlands.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Aldington to reply.
Last week, congratulations on your election.
Thank you.
Thank you. When assessing whether or not the land at the woodlands could be placed in the greenbelt in the borough plan, the assessment and legal advice sought was on the basis of the criteria as set out in the National Planning Policy Framework, Section 9, entitled Greenbelts.
Thank you. Could I ask Dennis White to ask his question? Pass the microphone back, please.
Thank you. I represent the Whitestone Residents Action Group. HSG 9 appears to have been included in the plan at the last minute. As you have acknowledged in the plan, Nuneaton is the most densely populated town in Warwickshire, and Whitestone has major current traffic problems resulting in congestion and air pollution. HSG 9 forms part of a greenbelt environmental outdoor asset greatly treasured by Whitestone residents. How have you decided that this current greenbelt land should be used for development without identifying any exceptional circumstances, not consulting with the residents as required by the National Planning Framework Policy Guidelines, and not undertaking a proper traffic and pollution study as would be expected if you were looking after the interests of residents whom local councillors are elected to do? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. White. Councillor Aldington.
In the borough plan, the council has to be sure that they are both developable and deliverable. In this way, only land put forward by landowners was considered to be deliverable. These sites were then tested against the vision and objectives for the plan and the development strategy as outlined in the plan. Where brownfield sites were suitable for development, they have been included in the plan for development. However, there is not enough brownfield land to meet the full housing and employment needs for the borough. This has meant that some sites in the Greenbelt have been allocated for development. This has been the case for the version of the plan consulted on some years ago. Explanation for having to include land within the Greenbelt is included in the plan. Before allocations could be made, the council has worked with Warwickshire County Council, who are the highway authority, who developed a strategic transport assessment of the whole of the plan. This work was carried out during 2016 and fed into the plan, which was consulted on in January, February and March this year. The strategic transport assessment identified the main road improvements needed to minimise any disruptions to the road network as a result of the housing allocations. Each development that comes forward will have to contribute money to help fund these road improvements. In the same way, other facilities such as schools and doctors' surgeries have also been considered. And development will also pay towards the new or extended provision required. The consultation period for this plan ran between the 31st of January and the 13th of March this year, and all objections and comments made at the time will be forwarded to the Planning Inspectorate with the plan for the independent inspector to consider.
Could I ask Angela Reeves to ask a question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, Council. I speak on behalf of Bedlam, which is the Bedworth and Exhall Development Land Action Meetings. And I would like to ask, in the National Planning Policy Framework, it is stated that greenbelt land should only be used in exceptional circumstances. Taking another area's excess does not constitute exceptional circumstances.
Well, I'm sorry, can I just stop you there for a moment? So I haven't got a list of the questions. Are you saying that's not the one that's been submitted?
No, I'm coming on to that now.
Well, I'm sorry, you should only be referring to the one submitted. I've allowed it to go on because I didn't have a copy of the questions in front of me.
Why is School Lane Belt land, HSG 6, being put forward for building when there are brownfield sites such as Hawkesbury Junction and Galley Common still to be utilised? Thank you.
OK, thank you. Councillor Aldington.
Thank you. Junction suggested. However, most of the land around there is also within the green belt. Some land at Galley Common also falls within the green belt. Of the land that is not within the green belt, the council have recently given outline approval for 262 houses on one site and are minded to approve 300 on another site. The reason for the allocations is as set out in the borough plan. Objections received to all allocations will be forwarded to the Planning Inspectorate for their consideration.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask Martin Vernon to ask his question?
With specific reference to HSG 7 and HSG 8, when did NBBC notify Warwickshire Highways about the additional employment and housing sites in the 2017 draft plan?
Councillor Aldington.
Borough Council notified Warwickshire County Council as the Highway Authority about the new housing and employment sites being considered in February 2016. The sites were then assessed through an update strategic transport assessment which was commissioned jointly by Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council and Warwickshire County Council. The findings then fed into the consideration of sites when culminated in the borough plan, which was subject to consultation between January the 31st and 13th of March this year.
Ask Lubisa Cekovic. Apologies if I've got your name wrong.
No, it's right, you're not the first, you won't be the last, Mr Mayor.
OK, thank you.
OK, I'm asking this question, as my predecessor was, on behalf of BRV, Bulkington Residents' Voice. And my question is, when did Warwickshire County Council run their traffic models and for all the sites, and where are these outputs from the traffic models for the 2017 version of the local plan, and where are the results publicised along with an explanation of them?
OK, thank you. Councillor Aldington.
Sites was undertaken throughout June and July 2016. The raw data from the modelling was not published as part of the final Strategic Transport Assessment report. However, the results and final outputs are included in the report. The report is available on our council website.
OK, could I ask Corinne Vernon for her question, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm also asking my question on behalf of BRV, Bulkington Residents Group. Where is there a single document that clearly quantifies all the costs of the infrastructure, and why didn't Nuneaton and Bedworth Council provide and maintain a website register or a list of the call for site submissions? And we noted an excellent site had been maintained by Rugby Borough Council, and I pointed you towards the link.
Councillor Aldington.
Strategic allocations in the borough plan has its own policy. This lists the infrastructure requirements such as schools, doctors and open space required to support that particular allocation. The infrastructure delivery plan, which sits alongside the borough plan and is also to be submitted to the Planning Inspectorate, details specific schemes which will be brought forward during the life of the plan. This document is available again on our website and has been drawn up with the infrastructure providers. The infrastructure delivery plan includes the costs and expected delivery timescales for the transport schemes for the strategic transport assessment, as I mentioned in my previous answer. The infrastructure delivery plan is a live document and will be updated annually to take advantage of funding opportunities that come forward during the life of the plan, as well as any additional information from service providers. The Council published a list of the call for sites as part of the Strategic Land Availability Assessment, i.e. all the sites which were put forward were included in this document. This includes a map of the sites. The document can also be found on Nuneaton and Bedworth Council website and formed part of the consultation exercise undertaken on the borough plan.
Kevin Moore to ask his question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the borough plan, in regards to Bedworth, I am very concerned about an area in which planning to give building consent to. So I ask, why is this area being considered that has flooded twice in the last 10 years, which the devastation was all over social media in video for all to see, namely the woodlands, Bedworth? And why has this land not been designated the 3C status that is rightfully needed?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aldington.
In conjunction with infrastructure delivery partners, which includes the Environment Agency and Warwickshire County Council as local lead flood authority. All developments have been assessed and mitigation in the form of new infrastructure identified where required. Any new infrastructure has been included within the infrastructure delivery plan. All comments and objections to the plan will be forwarded to the planning inspectorate in full for the inspector to consider.
Could I ask Brian Walmsley to ask his question, please?
I hear a lot of complaint about the borough plan, and we keep hearing on news coverage that the Conservative government demand more councils allocate more land for housing developments to ease the national housing shortage. Can you please advise me which areas have been suggested for the necessary developments by the Conservative councillors?
First stage in the borough plan process.
Carry on.
Yeah, sorry. The first stage in the borough plan process was in 2009 when consultation was undertaken on the issues and options stage. Government legislation and guidance states how local authorities undertake the preparation of local plans. This includes objectively assessing their housing and employment needs. Allocations in the local plan have to be developable and deliverable. Sites cannot be allocated for development unless there is a reasonable prospect of them being developed during the plan period, i.e., in this case, up to 2013. To ensure sites are available, councils have to undertake call for sites so that landowners have the chance to put forward their sites to be considered. These are then assessed against the vision objectives and development strategy as set out in the plan. Sites are assessed and have been considered at various stages by members of the council, either through the Member Officer Working Party, by Cabinet or by full council. However, I can tell Mr Walmsley that all of the sites came to the Borough Plan Working Party at some point and that the Conservatives has declined to take part in this process for the last 4 years. It is quite clear, Mr Mayor, that they don't want any development anywhere and are content for our borough to stagnate.
Thank you. Could I ask Kyle Evans to ask his question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Point 157 on the National Planning Policy Framework states that local plans should be based on cooperation with neighbouring authorities, public, voluntary and private sector organisations. Can the portfolio holder tell me what evidence he has that this authority has done the above successfully? In particular, can he tell me whether or not he believes the cooperation with the public during the Borough Plan consultation was a success?
Councillor Aldington.
Borough Plan, there has been cooperation with other bodies. This includes Coventry City Council, Warwickshire County Council and all other districts within Warwickshire and Hinckley and Bosworth District Council. I can tell Mr Evans that all other Conservative level Warwickshire districts want NBBC to take an extra 2,000 houses on top of those already identified in the Borough Plan. I can also tell him that the Chamber of Commerce have objected to the plan because they want to see more housing and more employment land allocated. As well as formally consulting those at each stage, officers have worked with officers at other councils on a regular basis. Joint studies on such things as Greenbelt Review and Strategic Housing Market Assessment have been jointly procured and managed with these authorities. There are just over 900 people, groups and statutory and non-statutory consultees on the database who again have been consulted on all stages of the Borough Plan process. Public consultation on the plan has been carried out in line with government guidance. All the drop-in events for the recent consultation were well attended and many members of the public received specific letters informing of the events. Given the number of responses received to the consultation, I would say that the consultation events have been a success.
Thank you. Could I ask Jeff Lambridge to ask his question, please?
Thank you.
In this council's newly released housing strategy on population, one paragraph stands out as absolutely shocking. Quote, "The following graph shows there is already a striking difference between the population density in Nuneaton and Bedworth compared to its neighbouring authorities. In 2013, there were 1,592 people per square kilometre in Nuneaton and Bedworth. Compared to Rugby, it just over 200. North Warwickshire, it just under 200. And Warwick, who scored second highest, at 491. This is maybe why our roads are blocked and services stretched, not to mention the pollution it must be causing. May I say, this should have been the council's main argument when it came to housing numbers, but sadly they seem to have missed the bus big time and gone for the 14,000, which tonight should be ripped up and started again, certainly not sent to the inspectorate. I will be asking that this council do not rescind minutes 307 and 527 and stick to their word and return Bedworth Woodlands to the Greenbelt where it belongs. If not, I too ask if councillors Danny Oldington and Tony Lloyd would resign from this council for misleading the electorate of the Slough ward with their famous leaflet, which they signed, which reads, quote, "Labour has a proven history of protecting the woodlands. It remains council policy to protect it, and as your Labour councillors, we have no intention of changing our policy as long as we are in power. So come on, Councillor Oldington and Lloyd, stick to your promises."
Councillor Oldington, do you wish to respond to that statement? No? Go. Could I ask Peter Gilbert to make his statement, please? Peter Gilbert not here, no? Question number 11, which isn't a question, it's a statement, is from Peter Gilbert.
I would like to ask, if not urge this Borough Council to see reason and not to allow a borough plan to become council policy that demands industrial estates behind Goodyear's End Lane School and heavy industrial traffic, making traffic and road safety issues significantly worse and affecting the standard of living in that area. I don't believe this is a way in which these people should be treated. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Oldington, do you wish to respond to that statement? No? In that case, it's not even on it, is it Michelle Condacourt? Okay. Could I ask Mrs Condacourt to ask her question, please?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to really make a statement of things. I really urge this council not to take this current draft of the borough plan forward to the planning inspectorate. The infrastructure delivery plan just does not cope with what is being proposed. The air quality documents that have been put in there and things just do not tie up with the amount of traffic we've already got, never mind all the traffic that we would get. On the draft, it does say that the CCG commented on every housing allocation that it did not include, adequate primary medical care, and there is nothing in the infrastructure delivery plan that's actually going to, get that to be achieved. So I urge you to go back to the drawing board and rejig everything so that we have actually something that could actually be approved.
Councillor Alderton, no? In that case, can I move on and ask Bhagwant Pandey to ask his question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm calling on the leading Labour group on the Borough Council to consider the unnecessary use of green belt on School Lane before they made their decision on sending the borough plan off for submission. Will the Labour Borough Council please reconsider their original decision on vote against the adoption of a borough plan that will deplete Exol's green belt, increase traffic and congestion on School Lane and Coventry Road, and significantly damage the environment and air quality for Exol residents?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aldington, would you like to reply?
The Borough Plan is at the stage of submission to the Planning Inspectorate for independent examination. At this stage, the plan will be examined by an inspector, and all the objections and comments received during the recent consultation period will be forwarded to the Planning Inspectorate, who will consider them all then. Where an inspector highlights issues that he or she considers are the main issues, he or she will arrange for hearings to be held for interested bodies to attend and to put their concerns directly to them, after which he or she will consider them and complete a report which will be forwarded to the Council for consideration. Whether or not the plan is approved for submission to this independent examination is a matter for full Council and not just the ruling group.
Could I ask Mark Sullivan to ask his question, please?
Hello, this is Mark Sullivan, Campaign to Protect Rural England, Warwickshire branch. The report to Cabinet and full Council does not provide any explanation for why the housing requirement for the borough is set at 13,374 houses in 2011 to 2031, that's the figure in the latest borough plan, and not 6,560. It does not explain why the alternative calculation of a requirement of 6,560 for the plan period, made and submitted by Councillor K.A. Condacor, has not been accepted and used in preparing the housing policies of the plan. Now, the plan does have a text about how they did reach their figure, but they haven't explained what is wrong with Councillor Condacor's figure. Can the portfolio holder responsible for the local plan prepare and publish a detailed statement that analyses the two alternative housing requirement figures for the borough for the plan period and explain why the calculations by Councillor Condacor have not been used to prepare the plan? I'm sure if I suggest you could do that in 2 weeks, and then it be circulated and published, it would help everybody.
Councillor Aldington. The document includes within it a section on the overall development needs of the borough. This includes full explanations of the housing and employment needs for Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough between 2011 and 2031, and it was not considered necessary for the whole of this section to be reproduced in the Cabinet and Committee report tonight. The methodology for agreeing housing numbers has been drawn up with the other authorities in Warwickshire and Coventry City Council and forms part of the duty to cooperate. This methodology has been accepted by the independent inspectors examining the other local plans, most recently those prepared by Coventry City Council and Warwick District Council. I'm aware that Councillor Condacor has made representations to the borough plan. These comments will be forwarded to the Planning Inspectorate at the same time as the plan is submitted. If the Inspector considers this as a main issue to be discussed at a hearing, he will be invited to put his thoughts and evidence before the Inspector. I would also add, that, Mr Mayor, that the Council has properly trained, professionally qualified experts in the field of planning and development. Councillor Condacor, to my knowledge, is not.
Can I please ask people to remain calm? Councillor Condacor, I'll apply that the same to you as I do to everybody else. Could I ask Kate Coyle to make her statement, please?
Thank you. This evening I would like to concentrate on the Bedworth of Nuneaton and Bedworth. It's good to know the Borough Plan submission to the Inspector is at last being voted on tonight. It appears much work has been done by the Council on this plan, but not so much on communicating the plan to the public, verbally or in the written composition of the plan. The responses to the plan underline how difficult the methodology used to come to the number of houses proposed sits with the number of jobs available to people who may come to live in Nuneaton and Bedworth but work elsewhere. Most of these jobs will not be full-time, well-paid jobs, but be part-time, low-paid jobs. So far, jobs that Nuneaton and Bedworth may have thought would come from Friargate in Coventry, for example, haven't materialised. The failure of this £100 million project resulted in a loss of 15,000 jobs, and the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors withdrawing because of the high rates and other unresolved issues, like the length of time taken up in discussion and the slow build process. Expensive rates and leases also deter companies, as in the past this plan, with no investment in the future of the centre of Bedworth or its residents. There is no money for refurbishment or infrastructure. Bedworth has been neglected over the years, and again in this plan. The only thing the plan seems fit to do is to use our little bit of greenbelt for industrial use, housing and a traveller site. It's a travesty to say the least. However, if the inspector can see something in the plan to disagree with this, then there may be some hope for Bedworth residents, as up to now the local enterprise partnership has also not assisted or helped NBBC with investments in Bedworth. So this borough plan will do nothing, unfortunately, to stem the demise of Bedworth. For those voting tonight, I urge you to remember there is a Bedworth as well as a Nuneaton in this borough, and consider that before you cast your vote to pass or not, as the case may be, this borough plan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on from that. That concludes those questions and statements. However, I am aware that there was one other request made. It was submitted past the cut-off time, so I'm not going to take that tonight. But I would say to the person that had done that, if you would like to submit that question formally in writing to the Managing Director, it will be considered then at that time. I'm doing that because of the constraints of the meeting tonight, time-wise. Okay, thank you. That takes us on then to...
Mr Mayor, could I just very quickly, in relation to the declaration of interest I made earlier, I did one of the declarations that I made because I said HS2 rather than H2, which is affordable housing. I also forgot to disclose 1.6 because I made a submission in relation to concerning consultation and some concerns I had. So I just need to make sure they're recorded in the interest, because that was the agree that I declared.
Thank you for clarifying that.
I'll leave the meeting now.
Thank you for clarifying that, Councillor Margaret.
Disclosure of interest. I'm allowed to take part in the meeting. I can speak. As soon as I've spoken, I have to leave the meeting and I cannot vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Can I ask what the...
Points of order in relation to the Constitution and the timing of this meeting is the first one. I'm questioning why, given the Constitution says there should be adequate time to circulate motions and supporting documentation, why this meeting was called for immediately after the Cabinet meeting that considered this. So there's been no week at least which would have been fair to publish and circulate the motion so that people could consider it, members of the public could come and ask specific questions on that.
Yeah, Councillor Tromans, as far as I'm aware, all the regulations have been complied with in regards to the calling of the meeting, and clearly we will continue with that.
The second point of order is clearly on that basis we have not had a time. We've been engaged in hearing some very good points from the public, and so I would ask for a brief recess so that we can at least look at this lengthy motion and opposition members can have an opportunity to consider our response and potentially any amendments.
Okay, thank you. However, although I wasn't there myself, I understand that any number of members did attend the Cabinet meeting where it was discussed. I'm also aware, and officers will tell me if I'm wrong, whilst I was in the parlour, I understand that this piece of paper that you refer to was placed on members' seats approximately half an hour before the start of the meeting.
We don't get the motion until the start of the meeting. Meetings are held at 6 o'clock. There's no provision in the Constitution for members to turn up early on the hope that motions get circulated early. So not all of my colleagues were here even for the start.
That's one small change, isn't it? One small change. Yeah.
In terms of the motion at this meeting, it is effectively the same motion recommendation to minor
Okay. The advice that I'm receiving from the officers is, in essence, it is the same motion that was printed with a minor amendment to B, I think. So, Harvey.
I can understand, Mr. Mayor, you want to move on, but I think I want to be fair, and you will find no member of this side shouting and carrying on. I trust, otherwise I won't support them. But I would like to say the paper that's been circulated is only a very slight amendment to wording, a technical change, but I do think it's fair, Mr. Mayor, that members of the opposition are allowed, say, 10 minutes to look at that very slight wording, and perhaps for the council's legal officer to just speak to them and explain what that is.
Romans. In that case, the meeting will be suspended for 10 minutes.
If you ask the members to go to committee room A.
Yeah. We will, if we leave the chamber, we will return for 7 o'clock to recommend. If you'd like to go into committee room A, and Philip will brief you on that. Catherine, can you go along as well? Well, I thought... Okay, thank you. If I can call the meeting to order, please. We did say 7 o'clock, and that was actually 12 minutes instead of 10, and it's now 1 minute past 7. So give them 13 minutes. We can move on to item number 5 of the agenda, the notice of motion. This being an extraordinary meeting of the Council, which has been called following a request from the Council's monitoring officer pursuant to... Yeah? So I thought you were looking at me as I was doing something wrong. To paragraph 3.13 of the Council Procedure Rules, the purpose of the meeting is to consider the representations received in connection with the draft submission version of the Borough Plan and to decide whether or not to submit the plan to the Secretary of State for independent examination. Immediately before these proceedings, the Cabinet considered a report from the Director of Regeneration and Public Protection, which contained proposals in connection with the Borough Plan. Cabinet now need to make recommendations to the Council in connection with these proposals. Can I then ask Councillor Harvey, as Leader of the Council, to outline the recommendations from Cabinet and to formally move them as a motion for Council to consider?
Mr. For Planning and Development, Councillor Aldington, he will move it, and then I will then second it and reserve my right to speak. But I think it's appropriate in the circumstances for Councillor Aldington to move this.
Okay, thank you.
The submission that has been recommended by Cabinet tonight is the culmination of hard work, dedication and perseverance on behalf of this Council. I have no hesitations in recommending it for submission to the Inspector. Mr Mayor, I thought it would be useful if I gave a little potted history of the Borough Plan and why we are where we are today, as there seems to have been a lot of misinformation and half-truths bandied around about it. The last local plan was adopted in 2006 and ran until 2011. So this current plan has been 6 years in the making and not 11, as has been stated on many occasions by many people. Indeed, we've been accused in equal measure of rushing through proposals and taking too long over it. In 2007, a cross-party working party was set up to look at issues and options and the core strategies. In 2008, dark years indeed for the borough, the issues and options paper was consulted on and subsequently fell into the black hole, having been shelved by the administration at the time, who didn't want to make any decisions on the future of the borough. In fact, one ex-Cabinet member from that brief moment in history when the Tories were in power even admitted in these chambers that they had conveniently let it slip. May 2010, the coalition government was formed and subsequently scrapped the previous regional strategies under the Localism Act. They replaced it with, not much at this point, Mr Mayor. Local authorities who are in the process of updating and amending their local plans were left without any sort of real guidance or policies. In 2011, the duty to cooperate was introduced and not really fully understood, as many authorities fell foul because they hadn't met this new duty. In many respects, Mr Mayor, we've had to start from scratch on building a new borough plan. The duty to cooperate is an interesting policy in that it compels local authorities to seek a solution on housing and employment land which benefits the whole sub-region. In our case, that is Warwickshire and Coventry. So not only do we have to make provisions for houses that we need in the borough, we also have to take into account the sub-region, much like a regional spatial strategy which were abolished in 2011 to be replaced with pseudo-regional spatial strategies. Mr Mayor, whether we like it or not, the world has changed. We can no longer rely on government grants, slashed as they have been by some 60% since 2010, to provide the things that residents need, that residents expect. We can no longer rely on the county council to provide the basics that they are responsible for, things such as leisure facilities, parks, new roads, hospitals and schools. The only way that we can afford to raise money for any of these is through development, whether I like it or not, whether any of us like it or not in this room. Unfortunately, that is the way of the world. Either we allow the borough to stagnate and fail to make decisions for which we are elected, like what happened between 2008 and 2010, or we move forward improving facilities and improving residents' lives, and actually make decisions which we are doing here tonight. Mr Mayor, the borough plan is about so much more than housing numbers, and it is a shame that those opposite have used it as a political football instead of engaging in the process. But I suppose their inability to make any sort of decision was set a long time ago. I move the recommendations, Mr Mayor.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Tromans, your point of order, please.
I'm not aware that a recorded vote will automatically be called, so I'm putting you on notice that we will be calling for a recorded vote at the end.
Not unexpected, I suppose. But, okay then. Any member? Councillor Tromans.
Mr Mayor, the borough plan. You've only got to say those words for people's negative reactions. And is it any wonder? 7 years since the Labour group came to power in 2007, and it's still not done. The council's best guess is it'll take another year or so to get fully adopted. So 8 years in all. The ancient Romans built the Colosseum in less time than that. The Channel Tunnel, one of the most complex and mass construction sites of the modern age, took 6 years to do the whole thing. But coming up with a standard local plan is something that they couldn't manage to do in 8 years. And that's assuming it doesn't get thrown out by the planning inspectorate. And that's a bold assumption. The council's hope seems to be that the Labour bloc vote will force this through, this deeply unfair plan, before they run out of time, before central government steps in, as it has to, for councils that prove incapable of meeting their statutory obligations. But forcing it through tonight doesn't save them. They still need to rely on the planning inspector to show some pity on them and not just throw it out, but agree some recommendations. It's even in their motion. We spotted it. Item C. Effectively, please, Mr Planning Inspector, come up with some necessary modifications to make our unfair borough plan sound. Unfair. A word that's used by so many so often about this plan and the group opposite's planning antics. Indeed, in the last 7 years, we've had a long-running reminder of the political games, incompetence and mismanagement that is so typical of the Labour group. But what was to be expected? They can't even get the parking charges right. Can't even get planning for the new depot right. 1.8 million quid wasted there. They even fell out with their mates at the Cooperative Society. They thought they could outsmart the planning rules, the developers and the residents. It's deluded. They thought they'd just dump all the new developments on traditional conservative areas and spend the money they raised on their vanity projects. It might have sounded like a good idea. They might have patted themselves on the back 7 years ago, but it's come back to bite them. Because unsurprisingly, they outsmarted no one. The developers, the land agents, the speculators ran rings round them, made millions out of them at the expense of residents' wishes. We soon ended up with uncontrolled and unsustained and unfair development. New applications coming in all the while, carving up our limited countryside. Not just St Nicholas and Weddington and Whitestone, but everywhere. Arbury, Bulkington, Gallycommon, Slough. Yes, everyone learned what Labour councillors' promises meant when it came to the woodlands. You know, it's a simple lesson. It always has been. If you don't play fair, then it comes back to bite you. And it's also unnecessary. We could easily have had a borough plan years ago, a fair one. Reasonable numbers of new homes, predominantly on brownfield site, with the emphasis on affordable to buy so that young people could get on the housing ladder, on the one hand, and bungalows to increase provision for ageing population on the other. Balanced and fair, taking full account of local needs. A fair borough plan delivered on a timely basis would have identified employment land sooner. We'd have more jobs in the borough, reducing traffic problems associated with commuting to other areas. You know, it was only 2 days ago in this chamber it was admitted there's been no major road built in our area for more than a quarter of a century, and that was Eastborough Way. And it all could have been so different. With some honesty and openness and politically neutral approach, we could have long since had a plan that was a good and fair. Still, no doubt this motion will be voted through by the Labour members tonight, but I won't support this. I won't condone the shameful way that the controlling group played petty politics with local planning. I won't condone their unfair borough plan, and it is unfair. And people will remember the harm that they've caused, the opportunities to better the borough that have been lost. And they'll remember who is to blame.
Thank you. Councillor Condacor.
I've been attacked again today for not being a planning expert. Well, it doesn't actually take a planning expert to work out how many homes we need in Nuneaton and Bedworth. You work out how many people have got jobs, how many are moving into the area, how many born, how many die. And the ONS does this every 2 years. It does a full projection. And those projections are pointing to us needing around 300 extra homes a year. That is basic maths. On top of that, the government says you should have a look at how your economy is doing, how many extra homes or how many less homes you need because of the economic differences, and various other factors to get your housing target. So if you start with the 300 homes, 320, 350, whatever the figure is, depending on how you work it out, if you start with those sort of figures, you actually have to take off homes for the lack of jobs we've got here and the young people moving out of the borough. Last population stats, 145 people extra was in the borough in 2015. You do not need to build 700 houses a year for 145 people. I do not need a degree in planning to work that out. I've got one in engineering, and that works out, one house per person is far more than we need. So basically the numbers don't add up. I don't think anyone in this chamber, apart from myself, has probably read all the documents about the strategic housing assessments. But if you have, there are some really good data in there before the planning consultants have added on all their fudge factors. And I say the way the borough's going, 28,000 full-time jobs is all we've got. We actually need more jobs. We need more affordable housing because people haven't got jobs to be able to buy a house. But we do not need 700 houses built a year, backdated to 2011. Because the other thing that's seriously wrong with the borough plan, we do not have a time machine. We cannot make the borough successful over the last 6 years. That cannot be done. That is gone. That is history. And in Coventry, their local plan is to build around 1,000 homes a year. They've got a lot more success. They have a plan of 1,000. We're doing a plan of 700, backdated. It is nuts. And one important thing we need to say is it appears we're leaving the European Union. It appears we're going to have less migration. Well, all this extra 4,000, that's all coming from Coventry. There hasn't been a single study done of what really would happen to Coventry's population. And the people who are living in Coventry, they're students, they're young people, they don't want to move to Nuneaton. I love Nuneaton, but there is not a massive population move from Coventry to Nuneaton. There is not a massive population move from Coventry to Bedworth. Bedworth has probably actually got a falling population if you actually looked at the stats. We are dying as a borough. We're losing our young people. We need better transport. We need better employment. We need industrial units with small units to actually get incubating firms going. We need a plan with a vision, but we do not need 14,000 houses. We've ended up with 14,000 houses because Dennis and Julie Jackson went to these meetings, didn't understand what was going on, agreed to everything until it came out with a number, and the number that came out of the process was 14,000. And then Dennis goes, we can't have 14,000. It's a mythology, and then we didn't like the number we got.
Councillor Condicle, just give me one moment.
To refer to people, as we do, and I won't support anybody on this side who doesn't, by their proper name.
Okay, I actually thought up until now the meeting has been conducted in a pretty good manner, including members of the public. But it was getting to the point at one point I was going to remind members of the public to be respectful of the meeting, and I would ask everybody, whether they be councillors or members of the public, to be respectful. And I particularly ask that on a week that we're suffering at the moment with what's happened in Manchester. In effect, this meeting, whilst very important to local people, is really, not sure how to word it, let's say the back end of other matters. So let's be respectful, let's listen to the people, what they've got to say, and whether or not we agree with them, we'll go along that lines. Respect. Councillor Condicle, if you'd like to continue.
I'm on the book. Dennis Harvey and Judy Jackson agreed.
Well, Councillor Condicle.
I'll give up at that point.
I feel I must point out that the Right Honourable is actually a member of the Privy Council and as such, as yet, I have not been awarded that honour. Thank you.
Yes. This is actually, speaking from the heart now, one of the easiest decisions I'm having to make in this council, believe it or not, because I want the plan to go to the inspector, for the government to look at it, for all the hard work that's gone on, and to give the people of this town the opportunity to cross-examine, to speak to the inspector at examination. I can't understand why the party opposite are denying or would wish to deny the public that right. It would seem, you know, and the emotions run quite high, that we've been bombasted for our officers working within the national policy framework, bringing up a job. And I hope Councillor Condacor supports this as well, so he will get his chance to speak in front of the inspector. No matter what you think about the plan, and there's councillors on this side that are livid about parts of it, you know, but it needs to go to the inspector now. And I would ask the opposition and all councillors to give the public the opportunity to get to examination and see what happens.
Is there any other member? Councillor Golby.
Councillor Gizane, I think he indicated.
I saw somebody else up there. Yeah, I've got June.
I'm glad you think that the residents are important in this, because they seem to have been ignored up until this point. So thanks for saying that they're important. I went to a consultation that was in my ward. There wasn't a single opposition, Labour councillor there to support the residents. I was there, and so were my colleagues. The consultation event was well attended, but that was because one of the residents was so aggrieved at the fact that there'd been no advertisement going on that he knocked up his own leaflet and posted it through his neighbours' doors. That it wasn't well attended down to this council. It was well attended by the nature of the community that actually we're trying to run a big fat road through. But you know, you can't lay claim to that one. It wasn't advertised in the press before the Arbury consultation went ahead. There were quite a few complaints at the consultation as well. I think it was a bit of a testing exercise because it was the first one. There were no big maps showing the suggested roads through the proposed housing estates or changes to existing infrastructure. The majority of the people that I spoke to, on a scale of actually being bothered about the development, were more bothered about the fact that they couldn't see the proposals in their entirety. It wasn't a good indication of where things were going to go and how it was going to work. The maps that were showing the roads were tucked away in a document like as big as this, and it was me that actually got those maps out. I opened the document and I put it on the table. It wasn't there. Again, that's not something that should have been down to me to do. Other issues that whenever anybody wanted to actually speak about the infrastructure, and this points a reference to something that Councillor Aldington was saying about the constant references to Warwickshire County Council. I agree that Warwickshire County Council is the Highways Authority and they make the recommendations. But when I queried here who had reviewed the plans from the County Council for the highways to make sure they were acceptable, I was told that there is nobody here at this council who is qualified to discuss traffic plans. No one. There was also nobody at the consultation events from the Highways Authority to discuss those traffic plans with any of the residents. Not one. It's just like, you know, shut them down, don't let them talk. The proposals in my ward for traffic are just ridiculous. I mean, I've got a nice long history about objecting to the Bermuda Bridge, which I'm constantly being told is a county council project. It's a county council project. It's Tory-led. Lo and behold, it's one of the bedrocks of this borough plan, which is not county council-led, and it's not a Tory-led document because, as you point out, We never came to the working parties. Well, we don't come to the working parties because in a project management sense of the word, it wasn't a working party, it was a sit there and listen and we'll just ignore you anyway party. And what's the point in wasting my time? I can be out there speaking to my residents or sit in a room being talked at. I'm going to go out and speak to my residents. We talk about the constant cuts to budgets. Well, yeah, the grant has been cut, that's right. But we now get to keep 100% of our business rates. In lieu of that, it will be coming in. Regardless, despite that fact, there is a lack of employment land in the borough plan. That was identified on the 28th of September 2016. A cabinet meeting here resolved to ratify the proposed Coventry and Warwickshire Employment Land Memorandum of Understanding. The purpose of the agenda item was to seek the cabinet of approval for the Employment Land Memorandum of Understanding, the need which was generated by a significant shortfall in Coventry again. As a borough, we were required to take on 26 hectares from Coventry, in addition to the 87 hectares that was already identified as being required. That was agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Golby.
We didn't do it.
Please congratulate Councillor Troman, on his excellent performance in playing to the gallery. Chairman, I have lived in Nuneaton all of my life. I've done some homework. And there are many, many, many people, councillors, and no doubt residents, who live in houses when I was a child were a green field. But they don't want anyone else to live in them, so long as they're happy to live in them. Mr. Mayor, we have members amongst us who are members of the administration at Warwickshire County Council. I am interested to know if any of those members, all of whom are likely to vote against submitting the plan, have spoken with their county councillor colleagues and asked why the county council and all of the Conservative controlled district and borough councils are opposing the plan because it doesn't have enough houses in it, and I do have had sight of a written document from a very senior officer of the county.
Point of order, please.
Could I ask what the point of order is in relation?
It's to do with the fact that it's the makeup of the county council and with reference to this borough plan. When the borough plan was submitted, there was actually 11 Labour county councillors, 5 of which sat in this chamber.
Councillor Golby, you're away with that one. It wasn't a point of order, but okay. Councillor Tandy, if you'd like to continue.
County Council still had a Conservative leader and 8 cabinet members, all who agreed it. If the independent planning inspector decide that this plan is not sound, and I think that is one of the words that we had impressed upon us at the recent consultation meeting that we had with officers, if they decide it is not sound or it is unworkable, then they will reject it. At that point, the Conservative members' officers can then say, we told you so. But until then, they certainly can't do that.
You're saying?
You say obviously the residents are important, but obviously this borough plan was a massive opportunity to show what you've been doing for the last how many years, to show the residents exactly what the bigger picture is and what you've been working towards. These documents should have been clear, easy to follow for the majority, not the minority, and well publicised, but they weren't. We had a massive lack of consultation events. They weren't open events. We weren't taking comments on board and then going back. He said obviously the inspector will speak to residents. Why haven't we done that so far? Throughout these events, why haven't we had the public in to then come back, with yourselves, make amendments or work with residents to change things or to take their ideas on board, rather than just note them down, send them off to the inspector. We've done nothing. We've literally just listened to them. Yeah, we've had 5,000 comments, but what have you done about any of them? Nothing. So yeah, this council has failed to address the traffic issues we already have. We're going to have many more of them with the increased amount of traffic and a lack of schools, doctors. It is the county council, but we've just been elected. Forgive me, but I'm not going to ask you questions, but you were a county councillor up until recently. So with 11 county councillors...
Councillor Golby did. No longer a county now have to address those issues.
Thank you, Councillor Tanner.
That's already been... The document's going. Obviously we can, but you're about to submit this document. So what did you do at the time? You were a county councillor, there was 11 of you. As a group, what did you do about it, rather than just fold your hands and say it wasn't us? Because you were a county councillor. But that's another issue. I wouldn't make that a massive issue, but it seems the intention of this council to submit a poorly put together plan, despite the numerous valid points from residents. The council haven't held enough consultation events. One of them events was at a full council meeting, so none of us were there. So the leader of the council and other Labour members weren't there. So what opportunity have the residents had to have their say listened to? They've not. I just think we need to look at Rugby, Hinckley. I know some members have said we need to move there if we like it. We just need to look where they've listened to residents. And both towns now have had massive growth in the last few years with businesses and houses, but they're well put together plans. And I say the amount of businesses starting up in the two towns, they're booming. You look at the Crescent, you look at Elliotsfield. We've got nothing of the sort, and our town centre's still failing, and we're not addressing that.
Councillor Phillips.
I just want to come back to the point that Mrs Condacor made about GP surgeries. I think that's an important comment. Being a GP used to be an attractive profession. That's no longer the case. And just recently the government have been blaming GPs for just about everything under the sun and putting off doctors from going into the profession. They've cut the bursary for nurses.
Councillor Trent, hang to speak. Councillor Phillips, could you give me a moment, please? Could you just give me a moment, please? What is your point of order?
And GPs and the government is nothing to do.
Well, then, Councillor Trowman, you need to look at your own manner of address. Continue.
I think Michelle made a very valid point that we are short of GP surgeries. I disagree with Councillor Trowman. I think it's an important issue. And if we are going to...
Councillor Phillips, please give me a moment, please.
Do you know, I'm fed up
Councillor
with
Phillips,
you interrupting
Councillor
me.
Phillips.
Absolutely fed up with
Councillor Phillips, could I once again ask members to be respectful? There's really no need for people to keep jumping up and down and doing whatever. But let's be respectful of what's happening. Councillor Trowman.
Thank you, Chair. Point of clarification, I did not say GPs were not an important subject. I said that the Speaker wasn't referring to
Thank you, Councillor
the motion.
Trowman.
Thank
Councillor Phillips.
I'll move on to the number of houses that Councillor Kondaka made. He calculated that we need 6,500. Well, you could be right. If that's the case, then developers will only build that many houses if that's all we need. If you look at the development in Camp Hill, it's been built in phases. So the builders will build one phase. When that's just about sold, they'll start to build another phase. And that's how it works. So if we do need 6.5 or 7 or 8 or whatever the number is, it will come to its natural end.
Can I just ask you to calm down a little bit? Councillor Brindley.
I I'd like to strongly disagree with some of the statements and accusations that have been levelled at us from over the other side of the chamber. In particular, Councillor Oldington stating that the Conservatives are against all development and that we want to see this town stagnate and that we're using this as a political football. We've had people from the gallery from a wide range of political beliefs all speak this evening against this borough plan. Councillor Phillips made the point that apparently this side of the chamber are denying the public the opportunity to have their say when it goes to the inspectorate. But the point is the public don't want it to go to the inspectorate. They don't like what you've put in front of them. The members on this side of the chamber, we do want development in this town. What we don't want is unsustainable development. We want appropriate development in the right places, where there is a proven need, where there are jobs, where we aren't needlessly building on greenfield, damaging the environment irreparably, where we can provide the necessary infrastructure, and most importantly, where we have the best interests of the residents at heart. This borough plan meets none of that criteria, and if we vote for this, we are badly letting down the people that put us here.
Thank you. Councillor Grant.
Points in no particular order, but I'll start by saying it should be very worrying for all members that in response to the borough plan consultation, most people in this borough believe the plan isn't legally compliant. And if you don't care what their opinion is, why did you ask them in the first place? And just to specifically mention the Woodlands to start off with, the borough plan consultation document which the Borough Council put out admitted that the Woodlands is an area of historical significance and that it floods, which is what they use as justification to reduce the numbers. But where much of the flooding takes place is the part that they've kept in the borough plan. So they've gone against their own plan, and hopefully the planning inspector will read that and think, well, you know, even the Borough Council admit that it's a poor place to build houses, so we shouldn't do it. So let's hope that's what happens. And with regards to what was said opposite, that we should have took part in the process, nobody worked harder than the members on this side to respond to the plan and help many other people respond to the plan. I can see many members of the public in the public gallery who were out delivering consultation booklets, leaflets and petition leaflets with me and many others from all party political persuasions, including even a few Labour Party supporters and members. So, basically, Bedworth in those two cases are united against the borough plan, and I think it shows in the large number of people unhappy with it in their responses. I would say that it doesn't seem like the consultation was ran well. I know that lots of people didn't get letters until it was too late. We've heard about Councillor Golby, who's said that in her own patch, residents didn't even get a letter until after the consultation event in that area took place. I spoke to people on Charles Eaton Road a couple of hours before the consultation event over at the Nuneaton School who didn't get letters until it was far too short notice. And I spoke to people on Hospital Lane who didn't even get a letter about this, even though just a couple of feet up the road they're proposing hundreds of houses. I'd also like to echo comments made by new County Councillor Peter Gilbert that the industrial estate by the school on Good Year's End is not needed because 13,000 houses are clearly not needed. Growth figures don't show we need them, people aren't buying them quickly enough, and houses that do have planning permission just aren't being built in this borough. And in regards to Councillor Phillips's point, that if they just don't need the houses, they won't build them. If we give permission for 13,000 houses on the Greenbelt, they'll pick the Greenbelt sites first because they're easier to build on. And I'd like to also say that the members opposite have no mandate to put this forward. 3 of the borough councillors opposite were rejected by the electorate just a few weeks ago in Bedworth, standing on a platform of supporting building in Bedworth on the Greenbelt. And Ash Green and Exel. And I'd also like to respond to Councillor Ian Lloyd's point at the previous Cabinet meeting that the proposed building in Ash Green that you didn't know about is to be off Burbage's Lane.
Councillor Grant, if you could just...
I did know about it. I was asking County Councillor Peter Gilbert if he knew where it were. He clearly didn't because he looked behind.
Thank you. Councillor Grant, if you'd like to continue.
Where it is, we've talked about it many times and worked together to produce responses to the borough plan about it. I'd also say that it's worrying how little members opposite know. I know that Councillor Copland in a previous meeting didn't know that Greenbelt extensions were possible. At least that's the impression I was given anyway. He may have known about it, but as members of the public have said, it's possible, it's something that should be considered. And this isn't something I'd usually do. I consider it uncivilised to do so, but I've got to echo comments made by residents which are urging councillors Tony Lloyd and Danny Aldington to resign their seats because they broke their promises on building houses in the woodlands. And will members of the public please hold up their leaflets? As Danny Aldington has previously said, he wants evidence, and here's the evidence that they broke their promise.
Can you keep a bit of order, please? Is there any other... Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering who would actually speak tonight. Now, that's not because I'm bothered about speaking or whatever. People will know my opinion. I'm happy to give it on many subjects. But I do have to say to Councillor Grant, that is not true, what you've just said. And I have to say, from somebody on the planning committee that's new, and actually yesterday showed yourself up as not knowing about planning issues, and that's a fact, you're not going to teach me anything about planning. And that's it. Now, I'm sorry I had to say that. All I'll say is, Mr. Mayor, he started it.
Okay.
It's been...
Councillor Copeland.
It's been mentioned...
Councillor Copeland, just give me one moment. To allow this meeting to get out of hand. So please, as I said politely earlier, please constrain yourselves. Councillor Copeland.
The comment that was made by Councillor Grant was interesting. Most people in the borough. I'm never sure how anybody can ever say that about any subject. Of course, we've got a lot of people here tonight that are unhappy with the plan. But that's fine. That is their right. And they've had, despite what's been said, consultation periods. At least 2 to my knowledge. Well, if there's one thing, Mr. Mayor, I hope I'm not rude. And that's what's happening here tonight. People are being downright rude.
Councillor Copeland, could I once again ask members of the public not to be shouting out while people are speaking? You may or may not like what they say. They have the right to say it. Please respect that. Councillor Copeland.
Respect earlier on. Hopefully it starts now. Interesting, Councillor Gissane as well was on about traffic issues being ignored. Well, ignored by whom? Because the traffic issues are a county matter. Now, I'm not going to say you guys are all on the county now, because you are just new, and good luck to you. And I shook Seb Grant's hand. I haven't got a problem. Elections are about winning or defeat. Hey, I don't take it personally, and I've shook his hand on that. But one thing I do have to say, it's a long, long while that the Conservatives have been in control at the County Council, so I'm sorry, the traffic issue is ignored by the County Council. I find this meeting tonight really, really strange. I haven't got a problem with the public coming along and doing their bit about getting, saying what they want to say. But the fact that they don't want the process to move forward astounds me.
Mr. Mayor, does everybody continue?
Plan. I've lost where I'm going, but I can start again somewhere else. The fact is that here tonight, people over the past years and whatever, and it's been said that it's taken too long to get to this stage. You know what? I'm going to agree with you. Because like you, Mr. Mayor, I sit on planning, have done for years and years. And it is an issue that we don't have a plan. So I'm going to say it's taken too long. I might not disagree with the numbers, but it's taken too long. So here we are tonight with a chance to move things along. The plan's there. Whatever plan anybody had come up with, people would be there against it, as is their right. Had it been the people over the other side that put the plan up, I might have been there, or other people. There'd be just different people there. Now what we have is this now going to, not a government inspector, because if it is, well, it's not a government inspector, it's an independent inspector.
Thank you,
Let
Councillor
him or her make the decisions.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I... A point of personal explanation?
Councillor Ian Lloyd.
Can I make a point of personal explanation?
Councillor Ian Lloyd.
No.
Well, firstly, you know, we look at it, whether the development in this plan is in Ash Green, Dutchess End Lane, yeah, an area I stood in, School Lane, whether it's down Black Horse Road, which has been spoken about today, whether it's in Attleborough, Arbury, north of Nuneaton, i.e. Whitestone area, whether it's in Kersley, whether it's in Galley Common. All those areas, or a lot of those areas have been mentioned tonight, and there's going to be, whether we like it or not, people against development. Woodlands, yes, I've had involvement in the past with the woodlands. Another area, there is going to be objectors. Bedworth Heath, I was the councillor that put Bedworth Heath development forward all those years ago. Yes, there was objections. Half of Bedworth Heath live there now. At the end of the day, no matter where you put that development, whether it's industry or whether it's houses, there are going to be people sat in that gallery, unhappy. And I get that, and I understand that. I do understand that. But there has to be a local plan. We have no choice about a local plan. We've been criticised. We've been criticised for taking 7 years, 8 years. I don't care how long it is. At the end of the day, we've took our time. We've put through a borough plan. We're at the final stages now. Yes, there's been objections from lots and lots of people. And as I say, I get that. But no matter where we put that development, there's going to be objections. I've sat on planning committee for many, many years, the same as Councillor Copeland. I've seen what has been happening. We've been criticised on planning committee. It's our fault because development is getting pushed through from the back door because we haven't got a local plan. Well, if we don't put this through to the inspector, that's going to continue. There needs to be an end drawn to this. This, what has been a political back and fro, has to come to a conclusion. And that conclusion, unfortunately for the people in here, is the inspector. And I cannot understand for the life of me why the people opposite, like myself, are not prepared to let it go through to the government, independent inspector. If the inspector comes back and says that the plan isn't sound, then fine, we have to look at it again. But if we don't put it through, be warned. The inspector will come in, and there'll be a lot more people sat in that gallery because there'll be a lot more development going into this borough. People can say rubbish, but let me say, 700 houses, I believe it is something like that, the Woodlands, yeah? If that doesn't go ahead, the 700 houses have got to go somewhere else. If the 500 houses somewhere else don't go ahead, those 500 houses will have to go somewhere else. You cannot get away from the figures that have been done through the Shire. And at the end of the day, that is what we've been told we have to do by government to come up with the figures. We've come up with the figures with the whole of Warwickshire. You've heard what all the Warwickshire districts have said. They want us to take more. Well, I'm going to say to the people in the gallery, You know, at the end of the day, if we don't do this and don't put it through, it could mean more. It could mean less, yes. It could mean less. I ain't going to take the chance with this borough. I ain't taking the chance. I'm telling you now, I will vote for this tonight. And we talk of respect. I never once butted in or spoke out when a member of the public or a member of the opposition was speaking. I gave you the courtesy to listen, to speak. Please give me the same courtesy. At the end of the day, Mr. Mayor, I'm thinking I'm a county councillor now. It's
Perfect
the government
timing.
inspector.
Perfect timing, Councillor.
As Councillor Lloyd has mentioned, building houses is always unpopular and always will be, unless you're one of those that needs a house. In fact, I know several families who are delighted to have moved into a brand new home in Weddington, freeing up their smaller house for first-time buyers. Apart from that, Councillor Tromans has claimed that we dump housing in Tory areas and then pat ourselves on the back. But is it not true that landowners approach the council and ask us to consider their land for inclusion in the borough plan so that they can sell it to developers and make as much money as they can out of it? Indeed, I recall discussions with a Tory member who was extremely keen that her parents' farmland be sold to developers. Farmland in a traditional... Starting to think that I might have dreamt it because I've never heard her declare a pecuniary interest in that.
Point of personal explanation, because I was referred to.
I didn't hear any name. Did you mention a name, Councillor Elliott?
I don't think there needs to be a name.
I said a Tory member that I recall discussions with.
Okay. Councillor Gutteridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we all ought to have some respect for the people in Manchester. They've been through a traumatic time in the last few days. Right.
Councillor Gutteridge, just one moment. Excuse me, councillors, could you... Councillor Gutteridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The borough plan. I thought it was 6 years, but Councillor Adlington said... Sorry, I thought it was 7 years. Councillor Adlington said it's 6 years. 6 years in the making. A working party with no minutes. And this is what we have. £5.5 in weight, 900 pages, and overspill houses from Coventry. And we are now the most densely overpopulated borough in Warwickshire. I'm not against housing, but let's have it in the right place, chaps. The road system in my ward, which is Whitestone, is already gridlocked, and to build 600 more houses on the Greenbelt would have major, catastrophic traffic problems, resulting in yet more congestion and air pollution. The woodlands. I voted for the woodlands in 2008 to be returned to the Greenbelt, and from my memory it was proposed and seconded from the members opposite, and a recorded vote was taken. And now with this borough plan it is to be removed for the supply of housing, and I'm told that the land performs poorly, yet the farmer has made a reasonable living for many years. Thank you.
Man, I get booed at the end of it, but I've had that for 34 years of my career. It's quite remarkable how people demand that you resign and you do all these things. Yet they have, well, you've got one of them who's just come county council, so inexperienced and doesn't know really what's happening. For, you see, the speaker before me, on our side, took this plan with the chairman of the action group. He had all the time off from the Jaguar. He spent all the time fighting, and I spoke at the public hearing as well. None half of these won't even existed in the borough. We went on that air and we spoke to them and we argued about the woodlands defending, and we did. And the best of it is, at that time, the woodlands wasn't in our area because it was Mount Pleasant. I bet they don't even know where Mount Pleasant ward was. It was the biggest ward in the borough. And then they split it into the Slough and all the other areas. But that lad spent all the time at a public hearing. Just for your information, the government that passed the woodlands and supported the people was the Labour government by John Prescott. He supported the people of Bedworth and the borough as a Labour minister, and he supported the public and said no to the woodlands area, and he backed the public inquiry. Labour government, they weren't a Tory near us. They weren't a Tory in sight. And he knows because he stood there right at the side of that lad. And he worked hard. I take my hat off, he worked damned hard for the area. And he spoke well. I remember what he spoke about, even now, about the animal culture and everything. I can understand all that. And what have we done, Chair? Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor. What have we done? We ain't done anything, really. 22 years, Labour Council and ourselves have stood next to the action group to stop the woodland developing. 22 years. Hey, oh, don't kill me, it ain't right. I've heard enough of you. I'm sorry, no, I apologise. I've seen some of the leaders. They campaigned against us, and they got rid of one of our councillors. By falsehoods, the leaflet I complained to the Commission, and I was very angry because they didn't take it up. About what they put out, it was propaganda and lies, but went out to the public. And I took it to the Commission. It's quite on what they did of the woodlands. Yet, you say it ain't Labour, it's not us that put it in, it's their policy. When I was portfolio, I was advised that open spaces that were not green belt, not just the woodlands, but the woodlands was one of them, and open areas where most of them got, and even their open areas, had to go into the plan, else it could very well collapse and start before it goes, because we were not including in land that could sustain housing and whatever. That's what we had to do as portfolios. That's what we had to do to carry out our duty to the people in there. And you know, this week, that lad there and I, and this one, we set up a working party. We said, come on, you've heard all this, and they could have brought that to the working party. That gentleman came. He came, he may not have been happy with it, would he? But he came. They refused to come to the working party to advise us as a council and a working party to put their points of view, how it could be taken. It may be in a different form now. If they had have been here, because they're all playing to the gallery, woo, it's marvellous. I've done all that. 34 years I've done all what they're doing. It's great when you're an hero. But when it comes down to boiled facts, it was a Tory government now who made us put open spaces into it and made us put them in. And the best of it is, 22 years, and it ain't been passed yet, it's got to go to inspectorate. Because I see one thing, and I'll have to get advised. I think now, tonight, if it goes through, we've done our job as a councillors. We've done our job as a party. Once it gets to the inspector and he makes the decision, Mr. Mayor, then I am entitled to stand in front of the inspector and represent my ward as far as the woodlands are concerned, and I'm letting nobody down.
Thank you, Councillor. As there's no other member indicated, Councillor Smith, I apologise, I didn't see you indicate.
That's fine. I'm the newest member of this chamber. Unlike my colleagues on both sides of the House, my journey with the borough plan started as a resident. And just to back up what's been said about the consultation process, I personally was not aware of what was going on with the borough plan until I was actually given a leaflet by a county councillor, probably about a week and a half before the first consultation. Now, we've been told that to be adopted, the plan must be fair, be sound, comply with a statement of community involvement, meet criteria of legal duty to cooperate, And I'm struggling to see that this plan meets any or maybe all of these criteria. As the member for Bulkington, I live in a village community surrounded by quality agricultural greenbelt. This separates Bulkington from other conurbations around it. There's little industry, no employment as such. The planned development offers no economic benefit to the residents of Bulkington. It does, however, pose a real threat to our infrastructure. With too few schools, too few doctors, and roads that will inevitably struggle to cope with an expected 1,500 to 1,700 cars generated by the building of 700 houses on Greenbelt. That's a massive 30% increase for Bulkington in housing stock, which is totally disproportionate. Regarding the consultation, I see no evidence of community involvement in the development of the plan, and a box-ticking exercise given to the post-publication consultation, which were held at times people couldn't attend. They were badly publicised and offered no answers to queries given by the public around a wish list of infrastructural development. Proposed infrastructure development. People wanted information on schools, doctors, green space, highways, and apart from a wish list, no detail was offered or given. And that was my experience as a resident at that point. Objections have been raised, but I see no evidence of amendments to the plan as a result. Again, a box-ticking exercise to send off to the inspector with little regard to the communities affected. We're told of an infrastructure delivery group to do exactly what it says in its title. Again, I see no evidence of a detailed infrastructural plan. I may have missed it, it may be there, but merely a wish list of items that would need addressing sometime in the future, and no firm guarantee that anything on that list other than housing will ever be delivered. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. First of all, I think I should make it plain, and I have tried several times during the meeting, to say that as leader of the majority group, I do not support any sort of personal comments about people in this chamber, and I hope in my years on the council, because I think sitting here tonight, somebody said they were the newest member, I'm the most long-standing, I have never made personal comments about any member. I do not believe that is the correct way of doing politics. I'm sure when I get home, Mr. Mayor, there will be vile abuse about me, some of it which has already been referred, not by me, but by others, to the police. There will be vile abuse about me on the so-called social media. But if people think that is the correct way of conducting politics in this borough, they are wrong, and they are not supported by the majority of people. Now, Councillor Grant says he speaks for the majority. Well, Councillor Copland's mentioned this before. There are 126,000 people in this borough, or thereabouts. Depends on how many have increased or decreased since the beginning of the meeting. But that means 63,000 people at least support Councillor Grant. Well, I have no evidence to see that at all. And in this council chamber, as everywhere else, there are elections. And we respect the results of elections. Mr. Mayor, we lost power between 2008 and 2010, when people returned us to power very quickly. But I have to say, Mr. Mayor, never once, to my knowledge, have we ever used personal abuse in terms of putting forward our arguments. First of all, we've had it said about let's get things put in the right place. Well, where is the right place? The Conservative opposition have repeatedly refused to take up their allocated and done on a fair proportion places on the Borough Working Party. The reason they don't want or didn't want to take part in the Borough Working Party is because they feel it taints them. because they were part of a discussion.
Councillor Tromans.
Thank you. I need to correct Councillor Harvey. The reason that we didn't take the seat is we did offer. In fact, when I was first elected, the first thing I said was I made an offer that we would take our places on the working party if it was transparent, if minutes were kept, if people were kept informed about the information that was coming in. But they wanted to keep it secret, so we refused to take part.
Councillor Tromans. It's a bit like Parliament. You're supposed to address the Speaker, not the gallery.
I've got broad shoulders, Councillor.
Thank you.
Well,
Mr.
I haven't
Mayor,
really,
but just to make it clear that they have never attended, and I have to make it clear, Mr. Mayor, that I was not a member of the Working Party ever. So I had no personal input into that Working Party whatsoever. The Working Party and the portfolio have worked with what is the law. And in fact, in relation to a land we can look at, it is land that basically can become available. It was previously a different situation before the 2010 election, where in fact we could look overall at where it was best to expand the borough. Now we can only look where people are offering land for sale, which does stymie us to a great extent. In terms of highways, I used to have a little sign when dear old Councillor Wilson was sitting opposite before he changed sides and joined us. But he used to talk about highways all the time. And I had a placard that I put on here which said, highways are the county council, for which they get 3/4 of the council tax. 3/4 they get. So I think that's fair with 3/4 of the council tax to provide what they are supposed to provide. Mr. Mayor, we don't get 100% of business rates. I wish we did. We'd be laughing. We won't even get 100% of business rates when the scheme goes through. That's only areas such as the metropolitan authorities which are responsible for everything. So let's make that clear. We get a small proportion. During the past year, Mr. Mayor, not only on social media have I been subject to personal and vile abuse, but at meetings of the Coventry, Warwickshire and Hinckley and Bosworth Joint Committee, where I have been pressurised, some might use the word bullied, I have been pressurised to sign a document, which was brought with them at one point, to take more housing from...
Is it 5 minutes? Councillor Harvey. Thank you. The right of reply.
Just a few things I want to address. It was mentioned about being timely. Well, can I just say that between 2008 and 2010, your lot, none of you obviously, but your lot sat on the plan. And then in 2010, when the coalition government came in, they replaced existing policy, which is their want, they can do that. But they replaced it with absolutely nothing. So how can it be timely when we've gone from all guns blazing to absolutely stopping dead in our tracks? And we on this side have had to pick that up. Councillor Condacor said that Coventry are building 1,000 houses, which is sensible for a city. Is their plan 43 years long, Councillor Condacor? Because they're building 43,000 houses. He also mentioned that we're taking 4,000 houses from Coventry. Well, I can categorically deny we're not taking 4,000 houses from Coventry. We've been asked, in fact, no, I'll rephrase that. We've been pressured and we've been bullied by the other Conservative-led county districts, to take an extra 2,000 houses, which we have refused to do. In a cabinet meeting, not the one we just had, but in a previous cabinet meeting, Councillor Condacor said, oh, come on, just get on with it, so that I can go and I can have my piece, say, with the inspector. That's what we're doing, Councillor. You want to now scrap that? Interesting. Highways has already been mentioned. Highways are the responsibility of the county. For all road projects, including the Bermuda Bridge, the responsibility of the county. Councillor Gorby wants more employment land. She said so. There isn't enough employment land. Does she now have to declare an interest in the Chamber of Commerce? Because that's exactly what they've said as well. Councillor Gran, Ash Green. There's nothing in the borough plan about Ash Green. There is nothing in the borough plan about Ash Green. There is our plan about Ash Green. I will read it out to him if he doesn't understand.
Closer.
HSG1, north of Nuneaton.
Councillor Aldington. Councillor Aldington, please. Not at this point. Councillor Aldington, if you want to continue.
Okay, thank you. Gran. He's very, very sure that there's going to be either factories or industrial units. Well, he knows more than me then, because all we're doing is putting this forward as employment land. No one has mentioned industry. No one has mentioned factories at all. So you've made that up. You're peddling that myth. Councillor Ghislaine. Councillor Ghislaine, you are a county councillor now, yeah? You're also a borough councillor. So what have you done? You accused Councillor Tandy.
No, look.
But I didn't get to do it last time either.
Councillors, please.
Sorry.
Councillor Aldington, give me a moment.
Can I reply though?
No, if there's any need for people to get... It's things that have been said already, they've been covered, it's just something that's being covered again. It could have been dealt with earlier. I'm not going to go round the reeking with things, we'll just deal with it. If you've got a problem afterwards, if you feel that there's something not being done right, either by myself or another councillor, refer it to the monitoring officer. Councillor Aldington.
Thank you. When I mean you across the other side, is continually dodged the issues and not taken part in the process at all. So I'll ask the question again. What have you really done? Nothing. You mentioned Rugby, where you're from, as I understand, as a beacon for business. You do know that the town centre is now dead in Rugby because they've moved out of the town centre. If that's what you want in this borough, that can happen. But that town centre will wither on the vine. Borough Plan Working Party. Councillor Troman says, we need minutes. Minutes were kept. If he'd have been on it, he would have known that minutes were kept. Nothing was secret. I can categorically deny that now because it's all coming out in this council meeting.
Or we've got to come back.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, is he now chairing the meeting?
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Move the motion, his right to reply. Your contribution has been made. Councillor Aldington.
Everything that was discussed...
What's your point of order and where does it refer to in the Constitution?
In the Constitution, I'm being referred to directly. I have the right to make a point of clarification there.
You don't.
Well, if you're just going to let them say anything about me, Mr Mayor, we might as well go home.
Councillor Aldington.
Because he's obviously chairing the meeting, I'll wrap up now. But Councillor Elliott asked the question.
Councillor Aldington.
Councillor Elliott asked, is it just the...
Please, we're almost there now. Okay. Councillor Aldington.
Is it the landowners that put their land forward? Yes, it is. Do we go around picking areas that we fancy? We'll have that, we'll have that, we'll have that. No, we do not. The landowners have put this land forward that they want developing, that they want houses built on. It is as simple as that, Mr Mayor. And I'll wrap up now because...
And there was, it was moved that a recorded vote be taken, so that is where we'll go to now.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will read out the names of each member in alphabetical order, who will then indicate if they are for or against the motion. Councillor Aldington. For. Councillor Beaumont. For. Councillor Bennett. For. Councillor Bonner. Against. Councillor Brindley. Against. Councillor Copland. For. Councillor Daffin. For. Councillor Doughty is not here. Councillor Elliott. For. Councillor Ghislaine. Against. Councillor Glass. For. Councillor Golby. Against. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge is not here. Councillor Hancox.
For.
Councillor Harvey. For. Councillor Haynes is not here. Councillor Jackson is not here. Councillor Kondarka.
Against.
Councillor Tony Lloyd. For. Councillor Ian Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Barry Longdon is not here. Councillor Margrave is not here. Councillor Caroline Phillips. For. Councillor Neil Phillips. For. Councillor Gwyn Pomfret. For. Councillor Margaret Pomfret. For. Councillor Jill Shepherd is not here. Councillor Tracy Shepherd is not here. Councillor Tandy. For. Councillor Tromans.
Against.
Councillor Watkins. For. And Councillor Wilson is not here. Councillor Smith, sorry.
Against.
Okay, the motion is carried. Can I, everybody, thank you very much for your attendance and for being very patient. Thank you very much. And I declare the meeting closed.
All right.